The image is now iconic, a part of the American cultural bloodstream. A woman in a blue work shirt, her hair tucked under a red polka-dot bandana, flexing a bicep with the caption, "We can do it." She was Rosie the Riveter. And she was more than a poster. She was a recruitment tool, a propaganda piece, and a promise all at once. But behind that singular, simplified symbol was a vast and complex reality, a seismic shift in the very fabric of society that began not on a factory floor, but in the quiet, anxious homes of a nation at war. When the men sailed away to distant shores, a silence fell, a void that was both emotional and economic. It was a silence that would soon be shattered by the relentless, thunderous clamor of industry, a sound that would call upon women to step forward in a way they never had before. The transition from domestic life to industrial work was not merely a change of job, but a transformation of identity. Women, who had once measured their days in cups of flour and the mending of socks, now learned to measure in thousandths of an inch with micrometers. They traded their aprons for coveralls, their baking sheets for steel plates. In shipyards like Kaiser in Richmond, women welders, their faces shielded by masks, stitched together the hulls of Liberty ships with arcs of blinding blue light. In aircraft plants in Willow Run, they riveted the aluminum skins of B-17 and B-24 bombers, their hammers creating a deafening, rhythmic symphony of production. They operated massive punch presses, handled toxic chemicals, and drove forklifts with a skill that quickly proved the old assumptions about their physical capabilities to be foolish and outdated. They were welders, electricians, crane operators, and machinists. They were doing men's work, and they were excelling at it, discovering in themselves a reservoir of strength, competence, and mechanical aptitude they never knew they possessed. This new world of work was not without its profound challenges. The initial resistance from male colleagues was often palpable, a mixture of skepticism, resentment, and sometimes outright hostility. They were told they were too weak, too emotional, that they were taking a man's job and would inevitably fail. The work itself was physically grueling and often dangerous. Long hours on the production line led to exhaustion, and industrial accidents were a constant threat. Furthermore, they were almost always paid less than the men they worked alongside, a stark reminder that their newfound equality had its limits. And beyond the factory gates, they still carried the double burden, the second shift of managing households, raising children, and maintaining the home front, all without the help of husbands, brothers, and sons who were away at war. The societal pressure to remain feminine while performing brutally unfeminine work was a tightrope they walked every day. Yet, within this crucible of hardship, a new sense of self was forged. The weekly paycheck, earned by the sweat of their brow and the skill of their hands, was more than just money. It was a tangible token of independence and self-worth. The camaraderie on the factory floor, the shared struggles and triumphs, created powerful bonds of sisterhood and solidarity. They organized carpools, shared lunches, and supported each other through the strains of this dual life. For many, especially young women from rural areas or those who had never worked outside the home before, it was a breathtaking expansion of their world. They met people from different backgrounds. They learned to negotiate with bosses and stand up for their rights. And they gained an unshakable confidence that came from knowing they were essential, that the war effort, and indeed the nation itself, depended on their labor. When the war ended in 1945, with the joyous celebrations of VJ Day, the tide of change began to recede. But it could never return fully to its original course. The societal expectation, powerfully reinforced by government and media, was for women to gracefully surrender their jobs to the returning heroes and resume their rightful place in the home. The Rosie the Riveter of the posters hung up her bandana, it was assumed, and became a suburban housewife, fueling the baby boom. For many, this was a welcome relief, a return to a longed-for normalcy. But for countless others, it was a painful and forced regression. They were laid off in droves, their jobs given back to men. And the message was clear. Their service had been a temporary necessity, not a permanent right. However, the genie could not be put back in the bottle. The experience of the war had irrevocably changed the women who lived through it. And in doing so, it had planted the seeds for the social revolutions to come. They had proven their capability, tasted financial independence, and understood the value of their own labor. This generation of women raised the daughters who would become the second wave feminists of the 1960s and 70s. The quiet, simmering dissatisfaction of being told to abandon a valued and meaningful role did not simply vanish. It was passed down, a legacy of latent power. The fight for equal pay, for access to professions, for recognition beyond the domestic sphere, was fundamentally rooted in the proof of concept provided by the millions of Rosies during the war. The legacy of these women extends far beyond the factories of the 1940s. It is a story of resilience, of shattered stereotypes, and of the quiet, collective power that emerges in times of crisis. Rosie the Riveter was not just one woman, she was 6 million strong. She was the woman driving the streetcar, the engineer drafting blueprints, the chemist developing new explosives, the pilot ferrying planes from factory to base. She was every woman who stepped into the void and discovered she was more than she had been told she could be. The story of women in World War II is, therefore, not a sidebar in the history of the conflict. It is a central narrative of modern social change. It is the story of how a nation, in its most desperate hour, accidentally unlocked a force it never knew it had, and how that force, once unleashed, would forever alter the landscape of opportunity, ambition, and identity for women, and for the world they helped to rebuild.